Welcome to the People Data for Good podcast with Adamsen.
Hi, welcome back to the People Data for Good podcast. I am honored to have Tanmay Manohar here today. He is the Vice President of People Analytics and Workforce Planning at ViacomCBS. Tanmay, how are you doing?
I'm doing very well. Thank you so much, Al, for having me on the show.
Oh gosh, I'm doing well, and I have to say I get excited a lot in this work because I believe that I have one of the greatest jobs I can imagine, that I get to talk to people who are doing virtuous work on behalf of not only organizations but the people within them. And you have a great breadth of experience in math, in analytics, in workforce planning, and actually bringing this work to life. So it's not just some theoretical nice cluster of words, that it's actually delivering meaningful value. So if you would, please introduce yourself and a little bit about what you do there at Viacom.
Sure. So I am the Vice President of People Analytics and Workforce Planning. And day to day, what that means is essentially I use the information that we have about our employees to make their work lives better. To allow them to bring their whole selves and their best selves to the workplace. Essentially, I am involved in the process from, pre-hire through separation. So everything from recruiting to, workforce planning, diversity and inclusion, culture, kind of everything in between. I get to touch in one way or another through the use of data and really, humanizing the experience of how we use data and analytics when it comes to our employees. So, I love working at ViacomCBS, and I love the fact that we're creating content and we're telling stories, and I really see that the work that I do and the rest of my organization does is really in support of that. So even though I may not be, out there conducting principal photography or anything like that for one of our Paramount Pictures films, I still feel very connected to, to the work that we do, not just from having grown up with it and being a consumer of it myself, but I really see that the people analytics and workforce planning work that I do allows us to, create and tell important stories that bring people together.
Well, after this, I'm sure Stephen Colbert is going to invite you on Late Show. So yeah. Well, yeah, I truly believe, and all jokes aside, I truly believe that your work is uniquely important because you are bringing people analytics together with workforce planning, which translates into how recruiting is done, internal mobility, D&I, as you mentioned. So if you would, just explain what that looks like for you and why is it even together?
Yep. I think that, for our organization, workforce planning, like in many other cases, it's been a tough nut to crack. And I don't think, any company really has 100% found a silver bullet on, solving everything. Otherwise, if it were, everyone would be in the perfect, role for that they could be in. And everyone would be in a position that optimally maximizes their skills and, is the best return on investment, not only for the business, but for the employees themselves. And, I don't think we'll ever get to that type of utopia. So in some effect, workforce planning will always be around as something that organizations actively have to engage in. One of the reasons, to your point of why specifically is this part of people analytics, or part and parcel with people analytics at ViacomCBS, is that we have a mentality here that when we think about human resources as an organization and our people organization more broadly, if we're the people who have all the information about our employees, then why aren't we the ones bringing problems and bringing solutions to the forefront? I think a lot of times when people think about a people org or an HR org, they think about, the people that you call when someone's done something wrong, like someone who needs to come in and intervene in a situation. But if we have all this information about, how our employees want to optimally work, where their skills would be best suited around the organization, what are the trends in headcount, in promotions, hires, terminations, representation from a diversity and inclusion standpoint. If we have all of this information, then why aren't we the ones marrying it with, workforce planning? So I think that analytics really lends itself into workforce planning and thinking about, not really the short term annual, talent reviews or succession planning or, development plans, but more so, 2 years out, 3 years out, what are we looking at in terms of our workforce trends, our attrition trends? Can we diagnose any gaps in talent surplus or supply? What does this supply look like externally and internally, right? Should we be automating certain processes so that our employees can focus on projects that are more important, that really require human judgment and human interaction? Things that are not automatable. Do we think about whether we want to, recruit, develop, automate, retain, outsource, redeploy talent? How do we think about categorizing different types of risks that might impact our business and its profitability? So when we think about all of these elements of workforce planning, it made sense to us to approach it from a people analytics standpoint, because when we take a data-driven approach to solving these types of talent problems, we want to make sure that we have the right information out of the gate, and that it's something that we have a set of individuals within the people organization who can work with our line leaders to solve this workforce planning conundrum in tandem. It's something that I see very much as an ongoing process, not a one and done. Like, you come in, you write some big white paper about what needs to be done in the organization, and then it's on to the next one, right? Like, it's always a continuous part of your company, sort of the Japanese operations style of continuous improvement, really. Of, can you always find new ways of improving and having that sense of Kaizen, I believe it's called.
Yep. Gosh, Tammy, as you're talking, I'm like, oh my gosh, you gave me chills there at the end too, because many organizations have taken what I would call a data-centric approach, and they have not really had the discussions to identify what the priority information can and should be. And the most clear example is, for me, workforce planning is often housed in the recruiting organization, and it's not aligned with what's happening given internal dynamics. And what I heard you say is that it is a holistic approach. You're not only looking at arguably the recruiting strategy and internal mobility strategy, but you're looking at work strategy. How is work going to get done? And so I think all of that is exciting for any listener, no matter what role. It's like, that's where the world needs to go. However, there is a significant, what I would call, knowing doing gap. To echo Jeffrey Pfeffer, it's like, yeah, we kind of know that we have to do that, but actually, how do we do it? And what I heard you say is that you're taking a process-centric approach. You're getting the right people in the room and then having the discussions, and that's informing how you move forward. Is that a fair playback? And would you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'd say that's a fair playback, where, to what you mentioned around it often falling, within recruiting and the purview of a talent, acquisition organization. The important part, of our process is that we include our talent acquisition team as part of this process as well, so that it's not just done in a silo of HR, but that we're thinking of it from a learning and development standpoint. We're thinking about it from talent acquisition. I mean, if you think of kind of 4 key areas of workforce planning that we look at around organizational structure, skills, needs, and training, sourcing and hiring, and then retention and engagement. Each of those areas cuts across all elements of our business. If you think of something like employee value proposition, and that's really shifting these days in terms of not just what you're getting paid to do and those types of benefits that were historically tied to an EVP, but you're thinking now, especially as people are working remotely and thinking a little bit differently about how they integrate their work and their life together. There are elements of the EVP that need to be considered through a different lens. And that's something that, requires not only the the talent acquisition team's input. It requires your learning and development team or org effectiveness team's input. It requires the input from your HR business partners. It requires input from your legal team around, what can and can't be done, who needs to be where. I mean, if you think about, now in COVID, people have traveled around to all kinds of different places or started to work remotely. And from a legal, tax, accounting standpoint, I don't know how many people, thought about the fact that, oh, if I'm working remotely, then I might be in a different state where, now I'm bringing up certain tax laws around where I'm being paid versus where I'm, working, and all of those things come into play. So when we think about all these intricacies across those four elements of workforce planning, it really does require a holistic view of thinking about all these different topics of, of EVP, of skills gaps and skills identification, and it takes a village to make sure that we're doing this properly. And that's just all the folks within HR. So beyond that, there's all the folks who are working with in the business and in our technology team and in all different parts of the company to kind of bring it to life. It's still early days, but we're hoping that we have something that will come to fruition soon.
I love what you're sharing in so many ways, because having been a practitioner before, I will say that our primary customer was HR itself, and we had other customers within the business supply chain and different business units, which was all fine and good. However, the idea of bringing facilities in, employee relations, digital transformation, and IT, operations, that's what I'm hearing, that you have what I would call, for lack of a better term, talent governance, where you're actually involving people, the right people in the process, not just, this black box that's just creating some stuff, that you're actually helping or getting their input and help to set priorities and making sure that they're ready to take action on the insights that you're delivering. So is that really where you want to go with this, and so far, and what you have done, that you have taken this village and created some structure around it, some cohesion, whether that be meeting rhythms or setting expectations, where they're consuming and taking action on reports or dashboards or whatever insights that you're generating over time? Is that talent governance and getting the right people in the room something that you've focused on? And is that something that you would say for others that, hey, this is a must-have and an early stage action that you must take?
Yeah, I mean, I found that it works very well for us, especially because when we bring in folks from other parts of our organization, you bring in a lot of different ideas, and you allow people the opportunity to be creative in their roles where they might not have otherwise had the chance to in their day-to-day responsibilities. I mean, we think of our company as a, kind of as a creative first organization that has, obviously through the content that we make, but there are opportunities to be creative and, to express yourself, and to combine, disparate data sets and types of information in ways that, you may not traditionally define that as creative, but I think it really is. I mean, if you think about, let's say, bringing an example of a new predictive recruiting tool that we're bringing, to the fore, and you go to your legal team and ask them about it. If you frame it in a way that says, hey, you know what, we're trying to solve this particular part of the workforce planning, landscape, and what are some areas that you see might be white space for us, where there are areas where we can push the boundaries a little bit, where we can pilot. Our CEO is a big fan of making sure you pilot and don't bet the farm. It's important to push the boundaries, but don't go crazy and take in an inordinate amount of risk. Really think carefully, do your diligence, make sure you have the data, and then with some careful thought, go ahead and pilot and try to do new and innovative things. And if you ask that to your legal team, to your tech team, to your information security team, who many of those folks might be so used to having to say no on a regular basis to different types of requests, how can you think about putting them in a position where they're able to say yes to things that, oh, you know what, in my experience in employment law, these are the things perhaps we can't do, but here are some areas that we can, that I think we can push the boundary, that I think we can, try to be on the cutting edge of improving an employee's, engage or an applicant's engagement with us as a company when they're first starting out and coming to ViacomCBS as a potential employer. So I personally think it's a great, idea to co-opt some people around the company to help you, in whether in workforce planning or whether in, honestly, I think this could be whether you're in product development or any part of the organization, this is probably applicable. But I think it's really important that you get some input from individuals who are not in your direct work stream, so that you not only have this diversity of thought, but that you also give them the opportunity to not only lend their expertise, but to open your eyes up to areas that you might not have thought about solving a particular problem in. So I certainly rely on, our legal team, our InfoSec team, our technology team, and our business and business partners in ways that other folks might not. And I find that really makes, everyone come together. And if everyone at the end of the day solves a problem together, I think it brings them closer together as a team as well. Certainly in, times right now when we're all remote, and, we came through a merger at the end of 2019, and many of us have actually not met each other in person yet. So I think even, getting to do this type of work together and solving problems together brings us together in a way that we otherwise might have been able to if we were in person. But, right now we're doing what we can.
Well, I want to ask you about D&I in a second, because that's a perfect example that affects multiple functions: recruiting, internal development, retention, compensation, rewards, all that stuff. But before that, I want to ask, going back to the governance notion, do you have a standing meeting once a month with this formerly disparate group where they can hear each other's ideas and so forth? Or is it more point to point over time where you're bringing people in as needed? What does that look like?
Yeah. So with the core team, it's biweekly, because we have a set of things that we need to get done, and it's a way for us to be accountable with each other, and especially because we're all not in the same geographic location, even remotely. We're not all in New York or all in LA. So we have some folks who are around the world. So we need to make sure that we're all checking in periodically. So for that kind of core, from a governance standpoint, we meet almost every other week. And then we do have this sort of hub and spoke model where, as we need to bring in certain experts in certain topic areas, they join in, on our meetings and present, or we'll make sure that we give a task to an individual to follow up with someone else, so that, for example, if we're taking a decision, one of the things we're working on right now is looking at a skills gap analysis for one of our departments. And, we're thinking about it. Most of that workforce is domestic, but we're going to have to make sure that we loop in our international team as well, to make sure that, the type of training or the types of skills that we identify are a need, or will be a need in the next few years, we're also thinking of it from a global lens. So then we also want to make sure that, we don't need our international HR business partners or international legal team on every one of these meetings. But when we have a use case that's applicable to them, that we go to them specifically. And it may be, a global initiative. It may be specific to a location. We have offices and networks in India, Argentina, the UK, and, over 40 different countries that we have offices in. So we try to make sure that we use this hub and spoke model to, keep the ball moving forward with our core team, and, not waste the time of everyone else in that next level network, but that we're bringing them in and keeping them updated as much as we can.
Yeah, I'm going to run with this thread before I ask the D&I question as a focus topic, because there's two things that come to mind based on what you share with the hub and spoke model, which I view in most organizations of any size as a leading practice, because you can only do so much directly, right? So, to scale, it's a required approach, arguably. But the question that I have is, number one, who do you report into? Who helps you prioritize your work, given all the things that can be done? And it also dawned on me as you were sharing, how did you get where you are as a function, as a capability? Did it exist prior to you? Did you create it? Did you bring workforce planning and people analytics together? Because it dawned on me when you said, Well, we bring them in. So that implies that they know who you are, they know what you're doing. There's a level of trust and respect there. So to build that internal equity, to get your work done broadly, took work. So, again, who sponsored all this work and continues to sponsor the work? And how did you transition to this state that you're in right now?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I think the first part of that, around who do I kind of report up into and how do we prioritize? I'm actually part of a broader group that deals a little bit more with digital HR. So that digital HR, you can think of it as an operations group. We're going through the process of rebranding a little bit now and making sure that, post merger, we have our own identity as a new group essentially that was created post merger. But that group directly reports up into our chief people officer. So we have a senior vice president leading that group, reporting up into our chief people officer. So really through that is how we prioritize a lot of our initiatives. To the second point about how did the people analytics and workforce planning function essentially start, there wasn't one before I started it. So a few years ago when I joined ViacomCBS, I was actually in our what's now our ad sales group. At the time was advanced advertising and data strategy. So when I was completing my MBA, I actually interned at ViacomCBS and created a sort of a data-driven mood board for our advertising team. So it was essentially something where if you were looking for an integrated marketing campaign with one of our brands, and you had a target audience you were going after, then it was kind of a visual aid, a data-driven visual aid to help the creative team think about what are this audience's affinities. So if you were to walk into their bedroom of that audience, what music are they listening to? What movie posters do they have on the wall? How do they consume content? Where do they consume content? What genres of content do they consume? What are the influencers? Who are the influencers they follow? So all of this essentially was I created in a repeatable infographic that pulled in from various different data sources and presented it in a creative visual manner for our creative team. And I called that product Viewprint, sort of like a viewer blueprint. And the tool that we used on a lot of different marketing campaigns for an integration with Broad City and Tomb Raider, the video game. It was used in the release of the Deadpool movie, a bunch of different things. And that effectively got me my full-time role at ViacomCBS. So I joined then that same data strategy team full-time. I worked a lot on a couple of different projects related to influencer marketing, related to how do you find the right influencers for marketing campaigns? How do you predict how well a social media post will do based on its different attributes? So I worked on that for a couple of years, and at that time, our executive vice president got promoted to chief data officer of the whole company. He stole a couple of us and made kind of a ragtag group of internal data consultants who were really responsible for evangelizing the use of data and data strategy across the company. So that was a real turning point, because at that time I got to work across the organization. So I got to work a little bit with Paramount Pictures. I got to work a little bit with our communications team, with culture, with HR, and worked on some pretty fun, creative projects. One, I think, which really kicked off this transition into HR more full time, or at least planted the seed and allowed that to germinate. About whether this was something that I would be interested in long term, was a culture project. At the time, we had a new CEO, and he wanted to rebrand how we thought about our internal culture. And we actually asked employees around the world to write on little post-it notes what they enjoyed about the company, what they would change, what really excited them. And they put these up in all of our different different offices across the company, and we got thousands of these little post-it notes at the end of those couple weeks and transcribed them. And then we actually did a cluster analysis on these, and we created a little 3D visualization of this n-dimensional space of post-its, where we were able to see cluster areas of topics. So they could be as kind of mundane as 100 people want coffee in the break rooms, to much more meaningful things. And one of the things that came out of that, as an example, is that we saw this hotspot related to giving. And we dug into that a little bit, and we saw, okay, well, what's going on here? And we actually found that a lot of employees really wanted a way to be able to give back to the community. And some individuals in the past had been part of an employee, donation or gift matching program. And so there was a lot of conversation around that, around different offices and different locations. So one of the action items that actually came out of it was that, and results was that we actually reinstituted our charitable giving match program. So everyone up through VP level is essentially able to donate up to $1,000 of matched money, and ViacomCBS will match that amount. And the other thing that we added as part of that was that at the time, if you weren't able to donate money, you could also log your hours, and the company would convert that into a monetary amount to donate on your behalf. So it was a really fantastic way of being able to take some immediate action. How many times you fill out an engagement survey or something like that, and really nothing gets done with it. You don't see what happens, and we're actually really able to use that charitable giving program among a number of other things. Another thing was that we wanted people wanted a lot more transparency with the new leadership administration. And so we actually started a series through that called Bob Live, where our CEO actually joins a quarterly live stream. It's been almost monthly actually during COVID now, but joins a live stream where he brings on other guests. They could be internal, they could be external, to talk about a number of different topics. Could be related to something like the release of Paramount Plus recently for us and the team that launched that. Could be our CFO talking about our financials. It could be, in our most recent one, we actually had a doctor join from our CBS News team and talk about vaccinations and COVID and return to work and a number of different things. So we've actually seen a far greater amount of communication as a result of that culture initiative. So those types of things started to get me thinking about, oh, you know what? It looks like there's an opportunity to apply analytics to culture, to HR. And I went to, I started to get more and more of these requests. So I went to our chief people officer at the time and my boss then, our chief data officer, and said, hey, you know what? It doesn't look like we have a people analytics team or function to speak of. Would you mind if I took a crack at it? Basically, I went to them with a people analytics strategy deck where I had, written out what my plan would be for, starting up the function and, how I would prioritize certain projects and what sub-functional areas there were within that I could kind of lend my expertise to. And they said, you know what, sure, take a crack at it, and let's see how it goes. So I actually then switched into the HR organization permanently, reporting into our chief people officer. And over the past year and a half, almost 2 years now, was able to prove out the worth of that as a function. And of course, now I'm part of this broader digital HR group that handles, beyond just analytics and workforce planning, a number of other parts of our workforce experience and workforce enablement, really. And so it's been a fun journey, a bit of a winding path to get from really advertising into people analytics. But I really think of it from the viewpoint of, I was looking at customers at the end of the day, and how could we as a company better serve them. And now I think of our applicants and, our employees, as well as our stakeholders more broadly, investors and shareholders and audience and everyone else in that ecosystem as our customers. So in the same way that I think about how can the company better serve our audience, now I'm thinking about how can we better serve our employees and our applicants through people analytics and through workforce planning.
Yeah, I love those stories so much. There's so much greatness in there. I was about to say goodness, but it's more appropriate to say greatness, because I'm not just giving you a pat on the back. I am saying that to call out this. You obviously have the analytical chops. You have the educational background. You have the experience, doing consumer analytics. You understand data and how to stage it for analytical purposes and the unique challenges, particularly with HR data and doing that culture work. And as important as anything, you developed the internal equity through nurturing key relationships, which provided you with the trust among them and others to get after this work. Because what I've seen be problematic is there's been gaps in that capability map that I just laid out. And many people analytics leaders have been too junior. They haven't had the relationship equity that I just referred to. They haven't had the maybe experience or fortitude to set up processes, set up meetings and say, hey, this is what I need from you, because it takes being vulnerable to actually, do that. So there's some really, I think, salient messages that can be captured out of what you just shared. So, thank you for that. And I want to come back to it when we talk about the future of the discipline and where you're going. But for now, I want to ask explicitly that question that I haven't got to yet about diversity and inclusion, because that is important to you personally. It's important to your organization, and it's important to the world in general, particularly given what's happened over the past year in the U.S. So, if you would, how have you tackled the challenge, and what is your position on where this, discipline, which was formerly kind of, okay, there's one person designated to do it, yet they were under-resourced, they didn't have much leverage, but you're realizing that have really served as an advocate to move the needle in this regard. So can you speak to that for a bit?
Yeah. And I think for us, one of the things that has really, helped us along the way is the partnership, among different parts of our organization when it comes to the topic of D&I. We have a global inclusion council, actually, that spans, not just, what you might traditionally think of as just HR and maybe whoever the head of diversity is in different, in an organization. But we have not only those groups, but actually functional and line leaders across the entire company. So, the president of MTV, we have all of these people as part of the Inclusion Council. So it's not just individuals from, quote unquote, what you might call corporate, but it's actually people who, are making a lot of the decisions, not just about our internal workforce, but also about the people who are working for us and with us to create content, individuals in writers' rooms, in front and behind the camera. So we've actually, put on our inclusion site, ViacomCBS.com/inclusion for anyone listening who wants to dig into it a little bit more. But we've set some of our goals on there around, what we're thinking in terms of representation, what we're thinking in terms of, how we want writers' rooms to be populated over the next couple of years, how much we are investing into creating opportunities for gender, ethnically diverse, LGBTQ, veterans, all kinds of individuals with disabilities, all kinds of different individuals to create amazing work and to tell their stories. So it's an incredibly important part of our company and of our ethos, especially, personally as well to me, as, an individual of color as well, that the company is investing so much into, putting its money where its mouth is, and walking the talk when it comes to a lot of these initiatives. So we've really benefited, especially from the partnership between the Office of Global Inclusion, and the head of that, who is a wonderful, Marva Smalls, a wonderful mentor to a lot of us as well as a wonderful partner and champion of D&I initiatives, not only within ViacomCBS, but across the industry, of course, Nancy Phillips, our Chief People Officer, and my own boss, Johan Ehrenstein, as well, who runs this digital HR org. As well as Julie Phelps, a number of different, who's the head of communication. So we kind of have this group of stakeholders, along with Krista Dalmonte, our general counsel, who think about diversity and inclusion from a number of different lenses. We're thinking about it from the legal front, and of course, in the UK, where required to provide certain information to Ofcom, the regulatory body that that regulates media companies, but we're also thinking about what can we do beyond that. What can we be more forthright and transparent in the information that we provide? So you need HR, you need the Office of Global Inclusion, you need legal, you need communications, you need all of these different elements of the company, as well as everyone else across, the ViacomCBS landscape, to get on board with this. We actually put out on our website a breakdown of our representation by gender and ethnicity overall at VP level and ups, our executives, domestically and globally. And that was voluntarily. It's something that a lot of companies, especially in the media industry, and I'll include tech in there as well, since historically it's, as an industry, has been called out for perhaps not having, the most diverse representation. But that we actually went out and, transparently put that data out there, and not only that, mentioned, hey, these are our goals and this is what we're working towards. It's really important because from a people analytics standpoint, I'm the one who, along with my team on the back end, am working to make sure this data is captured properly, to make sure it's accurate, to make sure we're dashboarding it in a way that lands well with our executives. At the end of the day, we have to be able to convince our CEO, our senior leadership team, as well as our board, this is what's going on. These are the steps we need to take. Here are the, deficiencies. Here's what we need to bridge. Here are the areas we're doing fantastically in, and we should keep up that momentum. And are there areas where we can use learnings from certain parts of our organization and apply them to others? There's, when you think about, some parts of our organization, like BET, of course, the audience that primarily watches BET and the type of individual who generally applies, most of the composition of our BET organization is Black or African American. But for a lot of other networks of ours, like Nickelodeon and Comedy Central, there's not necessarily a gender or ethnic or any kind of lean to it. I mean, sure, Nick is primarily more for children, but and Nick Jr., but there's no reason that the individuals working within brands like that shouldn't reflect the broader population. If we're trying to tell stories that resonate with our audience, how can we not reflect that audience as well? And how can we not reflect them in every part of the process, not just in corporate, but our talent, our writers, producers, directors, key grips, everyone who is involved in the creation of this content. We really need to strive to reflect our audience and tell those stories in a way that's authentic. So when I think about diversity and inclusion from my viewpoint, I think that there are a lot of different things that that we're working on. We're doing a lot of work on the recruiting front, using predictive analytics in certain places, not only to improve our and maintain a diverse slate of applicants throughout the recruiting process, but then also to de-bias job descriptions, right? And make sure that we're not putting job descriptions out there that use coded language or things like coding ninja, or using sports analogies like knock it out of the park or things like that, which a lot of people, especially in media, they want the job descriptions to sound cool and fun and cutting edge. And the issue with that is a lot of times you can bias it towards one location or to a particular gender or ethnic group or whatever it might be. And the type of language that you use may be quite exclusionary without you even realizing it. And you might not get amazing applicants who otherwise might have been very qualified for that position and otherwise would have applied had you just made a few small tweaks to your positions. And so we're using a lot of tools and technology to help us along the way. But you mentioned earlier kind of my math background, and I always still try to make sure that we're, to our CEO's point of piloting but not betting the farm, that we're going through that process rigorously. That we're making sure we're reading all the technical manuals when we're working with, another partner who comes, to work with us, or a vendor, that we ourselves are setting up experiments and really being data scientists when we're looking at problems. Like, do we have a control group set up, an experimental group set up? Are we actually looking at whether there's a statistically significant difference in the results when we're applying a particular type of technology versus not? Are we making sure that we're de-biased, right? That there isn't a sense of proliferating any kind of bias as part of a recruiting process, or anything else. We really want to make sure that there isn't any adverse impact. We really want to make sure that we're doing things by the book, that we're seeking, back to the point of looping in different teams, right? Where we partner very closely with our legal team, our information security team, our tech team, other parts of the company that are very well versed in some of these areas, and in areas where even they aren't, that they seek help from their peers as well. Bringing in outside counsel to help us review things. So I know that's a lot, but D&I is a topic that I'm very passionate about. There's a lot of things we're doing well. There's a lot more that we are working on that is coming down the pike. But I feel that we're in a very strong position, considering that we've taken a stance towards transparency and proactively trying to move the company and the industry forward.
Yeah, I mean, you're obviously passionate about it. Not only that passion has driven some meaningful actions. So, congratulations to you and your team. And so I have one call out and then another question. We got time for a few more questions here. The idea that there is a specialist in data and analytics in an organization has been both valued for 20 plus years. I mean, it's been, oh God, we're going to do people analytics or workforce analytics, whatever you call it. I mean, it's been a top 1 or 2 priority among CHROs for literally 20 years. Yet in many respects, we haven't progressed very far in some organizations. And one of the things that has been difficult is for CHROs and others, like, who is the person who's going to lead this team? Who is the business partner to that individual or small group? And what I wanted to call out is that in the recruiting process and even writing job descriptions, data, it doesn't only take the form of numbers. It takes the form of language, and it can be juxtaposed against other data which ends up telling a story. And so, but there needs to be, in my view, and what I hear you sharing and what I'll just observe as saying that you're a professional analyst. You know the risks and opportunities of certain data sets. You know the analytical techniques that can be applied to to generate insight that will in turn take appropriate action. That requires a certain set of educational experiences. Oftentimes, learning development professionals, they might have an opinion on, a survey or set of data. Recruiters similarly, comp similarly, all down the line. But there is a role, correct me if I'm wrong, for a professional analyst to qualify things that can be done and also put the brakes on certain things that should not be done because of the adverse impact that might be present. So with that as the staging, all this work is difficult. I believe I'll speak for myself. I just, having sat in the role, I know I could have made a living in a much easier way. And so, and I just will project that onto you, which then invites the question, what's your why? Why do you do this work? Because it's not easy. It's not linear. It's not, it is creative. Going back to what you were sharing before, which creates ambiguity and all these things around uncertainty. So you're going through the woods and you're trekking your own path in many respects. So what is your why?
Yep. So, for me, I'm someone who's really driven by problem solving and by doing things that, leave my environment in a better position than when I found it. So, I started my career actually in consulting, and, was in pharmaceutical marketing consulting, and went to business school, and then made that transition into media. And I think it was easier to make that transition because I took kind of one step at a time towards that, like moving from marketing in pharma to marketing in media, then marketing in media to HR in media. And kind of throughout that process, one of the things that has always driven me is how can I get to a point where I'm doing more for others. One of the things that really drives me now in this particular position is I grew up actually around theater and film, and I was very involved in musicals growing up, coming from a family that has a strong blend of arts and sciences. And you wouldn't think it from my biomedical engineering background, but I actually love theater. And one of the things that I thought about when I was starting to make this transition into into media and then into people analytics was where can my skills as a consultant, as an analyst, as someone who prioritizes an empathetic way of thinking and approaching problems, where can I do the most good? And I thought that being in people analytics, being in corporate in media was in an area that I could do that more so than going the route of the artist. And it's become even more relevant to me now because my younger brother actually studied musical theater and has been studying incredibly hard his whole life to pursue that dream. And out of college, most recently was in the Mean Girls Broadway production as
Wow.
Kevin G. And I think now about the type of work that he does, and as an actor of color, what are the types of opportunities that he is going to be able to get? Probably one of the few, professional musical theater on Broadway performers of his particular ethnic descent. I think probably the only one from our state for where we're from in India, but I think about, what are the opportunities for him and for people like him? And if there's a way in which I can, create a positive impact from the corporate side of the media industry, to drive diversity, to drive inclusion, to make sure that people who, have the talent, who have stories that they want to tell, are being given the opportunity to do so. That's really what drives me. If in, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, I feel like I've left the media industry in a better place than when I found it, particularly from a D&I standpoint. And that, when you go to watch a movie or you watch one of our shows, you feel connected. You watch stories that resonate with you, even regardless of what the gender or ethnicity or sexual orientation or whatever it might be of the characters are, that you connect with, these human stories, and that brings people together. If I in some way can positively impact that, then I think that's a career that is would have been well worth it, and well worth doing the hard thing when perhaps at times it might be possible to take an easier route doing applying mathematical and analytical skills in some other area. So that's really what drives me.
Well, yeah, thank you for sharing. And yeah, I'm inspired, and I really appreciate that you have made that decision. I think ViacomCBS is going to benefit. I think the people within the organization is going to benefit. And, granted, it's not that you just assume a role and everything magically gets better. It does, however, take a lot of chopping wood over time and, resilience, persistence, creativity, all those things. So again, I'm happy that you've made the decision, because we need more people in this space in the world, like you. So thank you. Given that I am inspired and we're coming up on time here, I do want to ask this question, because as you and I have talked about before, there is a growing demand for people analytics professionals, yet younger people who are either students or early in their career, don't really know how to get to where you're sitting today. So what is your, actually better said or better asked, what would you advocate young professionals or students do to get positioned to have a career in people analytics, people strategy, whatever this might evolve into over time? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, one of the things I tell people, young professionals, kind of regardless of what arena they're going into, is always to think about what are areas that I can go into where the path isn't yet well trodden. In terms of, when I created this people analytics position for myself, there wasn't one, right? And it was basically something that I spent a lot of time studying and researching, what is people analytics? How do I apply it? What are the focus areas? And went through the process of not only teaching it to myself, but then also creating a pitch deck for it, that allowed me to show that I knew it well enough that I could communicate it well to others, and what my vision was for that area, and that I would actually be solving problems that are top of mind for the people that I was presenting it to. So I would recommend the same thing for people getting into the field right now, that there are now some degree programs that are starting up in people analytics that didn't used to be there in the past, and certainly you can go through that trajectory, but for anyone else who doesn't go that route, think about in your organization or in another organization, where are the problem areas, and those problem areas don't have to be quote unquote HR problems. Think about the business as a whole. I always, when I present trainings on data-driven decision making or other things to, my own HR organization, I always make sure that they take away from that, make sure you understand your business that you're supporting. If you're supporting our, film department, make sure you understand the process of making a film, know what the terms are, know what, what it takes to market a film, how long before you actually start filming you're going to have to start getting, your marketing plan in place. If you're supporting our ad sales group, make sure you understand what our advanced advertising offerings are. Make sure you understand how we actually earn money, how we sell inventory. So from that standpoint as well, when you're looking for a position in people analytics or in anything, understand how the company that you're applying to, how they're making money, how their business operates, and what are the areas within that that you can latch onto that might have a people-driven solution, and take that and make that your pitch for starting up a people analytics organization. Or if one is already there, then use that, whatever use case you find, as a way to, put in your application or in your interview, hey, this is a problem that I've seen within your company. Here's what I think I can do to help you solve it. Here's what I'm going to be able to do to, give you more than what you're paying me for. And
Right.
I think ultimately, if you can give, more value than what you're taking, it's a great thing for the organization, and it's a great thing for the people who work there, to benefit from your work. So I think that's the advice that I'd give. Don't be afraid to, to try something new and to pitch something. The industry that I worked in just before this a few years ago of social media advertising wasn't really there when I went to college myself. Facebook had just become a thing. So, new areas are always starting up. So don't, feel afraid to take a stab at it. So I know we're at the end, but I would also really love to hear your a piece of advice from you too, for in your experience of what you've seen work well for people starting out in this area.
Well, my advice is to listen to what you just shared. I was laughing because I'm like, oh, Tanmay, you've obviously been a management consultant in your life. It's like, identify a need and fill it. Tell a story, and here's your value proposition. But it was beautifully said, and I mean that sincerely. And I want to call out something and it relates to answering your question. It takes, and we're going to say it for the third or fourth time, it's a creative discipline. And I have long shared, and I'm thinking about when I had the good fortune of presenting at HR Tech, it had to be nearly 10 years ago, where I shared that we're in a crisis of clarity on creativity, courage to actually get this work going. In other words, we don't know, we're not clear on what we can do. We're not clear on we're kind of want to press a button and for the data and insights just to come out, but it takes underlying work. And that goes to that last part where, we have to have creativity. We're doing something, and oftentimes that didn't exist before. And we have all these technologies, but we still have to harness them in processes, and we have to take action. And so that takes work. And so it's not magic. It's not just looking for a solution that's going to out pop the answer. So to your point, if you're a young professional, make sure that you understand the change that is envisioned by leaders and, how, and businesses in general, and how are you going to play a role in filling that need. And if you can, I think the future looks bright. I think this is going to be our last question, and then I'm going to ask you, how people can learn more about you and follow you. And it goes to the other side of that audience. When you're putting together that pitch deck, there has to be a level of receptivity by the CHRO, head of talent, head of digital transformation, whoever. So quick tidbit of advice for those leaders inside HR and out who are thinking about this. They sense this should be a priority, but they don't know how to commission this as a project, as a team, resource it accordingly. What are your one or two tidbits of advice for that group?
Sure. I think at the end of the day, most things are, if you boil down most problems, they center around people and talent in some way. And when you think about, one of the primary costs at an organization, particularly at scale, can incur is around kind of misused talent, where talent isn't, put in the right place to take advantage of their skills and interests, and natural talents, but also in terms of attrition, right? Of course, and being able to replace individuals who have left the company. I think there are a lot of places now where, if individuals are struggling with trying to put, to quantify why we need to do this, even on the D&I front, in the past, people may have thought, oh yeah, it's just something we should be doing. But all the research that has come out, shows that companies that have diverse leadership, are performing better. That companies, you think about it, even from a sales standpoint, there have been situations in the news where individuals have gone into a pitch meeting, and because they have not been, a diverse sales team, the individual that they were pitching to got up and left. And said, you know what, this is something that's important to me. You clearly, don't care or are blind and can't see that that's a priority. And so, you don't get, my revenue. So it's now become a very clear, financial nucleus as well, is that it's not just the right thing to be doing from a moral, ethical standpoint, but financially for a company, it is the right thing to be doing in order to create a healthy, sustainable, workplace, and a healthy, sustainable company that hopefully will be in business for many years. So from the standpoint of justifying it to your senior leadership, think about quantifying it in these different ways. And in terms of, getting it started, think about having a few individuals who, have complementary skill sets related to, of course, consulting, related to, you need someone in there who knows some math. At the end of the day, this is analytics, and there's going to be a level of technical sophistication that's required, and also someone in there who is able to be a bit of a visionary and come up with, not only what are the problems that we're not thinking of, but what are the potential solutions to solving them. So look for maybe one person, and maybe a few different people who each excel at these different types of skills. But I think if you can have a combination of those skills, you'll have a people analytics team that is able to not only identify problems, but then come to the table with a solution ready to go as well. Not just a problem identified. So I think if you have all of these things, you'll be in pretty good shape.
Guy, I love your response so much. And me being me, I'm going to sneak in yet one more question, so forgive me. But I think if I'm a listener, I would want this question asked, is that here we are in 2021, COVID is winding down, hopefully, knock on wood, all those things. And when I grew up in this space in the early 2000s, it was really about kind of heavy lifting and staging the data in SAS or SPSS or even Excel, and then doing the analysis, package it in a deliverable, finding an audience for it, and going on down the line. Now, much of that process I just described is automated, and there are tools all over the place. And most of these tools are, they're process-based. They're meant to improve or stand up a process. And they might say that they do analytics, but usually it's the analytics that are, within that process, right? So the question is, to what extent does that people analytics leader that I commission, if I'm a CHRO or a, head of talent or HR operations, whatever, I bring in an individual or a group, how much do I have to be open-minded to a budget that is going to include tools? And two, at the end of the day, is I am a people analytics leader, and obviously in your shoes now, that how much do I have to be an educated buyer? And it's not just doing the heavy lifting internal all the time. It actually creating an ecosystem of solutions that are going to help do what I need to do. What are your thoughts on that before we wrap?
I think it's important because, when we think about justifying what we need to get done within a people organization, the first thing that doesn't, it doesn't necessarily come to mind first that we should be doing like a discounted cash flow analysis, or thinking about, time value of money, and, all of these concepts related to, budgeting and forecasting. But that's actually the process that I take when I think about the types of investments that we're, that we're trying to make. Are we actually investing money into this project that we're going to see a considerable amount of payoff, and something that more so would give us value than if we were to take this money and put it to something else, right? We're thinking about our internal rate of return, our hurdle rate, et cetera. So I kind of pulled a little bit from my MBA when I applied that type of thinking to this people analytics function. But I think it was really important because it served to ground our team in a way of thinking that, we're using our company's resources, and we're using our, our human capital in a way that we need to get the best bang for our buck. We can't just do something because it seems like it's something that we should do. A lot of times in the rest of the company as well, like learning and development, like, yeah, people should probably be learning, but does it mean you should spend $2 million on a new, LMS, or on, a training? Like, you think about it, right? Like, what are you getting from it? If you do some sort of innovation training, are you actually setting up metrics to follow up down the road, whether the people who went to that training have now started new projects with each other that they otherwise wouldn't have? And are you now quantifying those types of projects in terms of, changes in top line or bottom line, however you decide to quantify the positive impact of that, or whether it's retention because now they're able to work on things they otherwise might not have. But you always want to think of this process from be kind of serious about your about your resources, and quantify it in a way and justify it in a way that that makes sense. So, and the other thing is, yes, you need to be an educated buyer, but I always prefer adoption over sophistication. You can get by on a shoestring budget in a lot of cases if you have real problem solving capability. The internship project that eventually became a product that I created, Viewprint, I created it for $20. It was a $20 subscription to an infographic creating tool. And I taught myself all the rest. And I leaned on a lot of other internal resources to teach me how to use, Adobe Audience Manager, and teach me how to use a lot of other tools that we already had available to us. So, you can create a lot of amazing things. That tool led to millions of, dollars in sales, and it was created with $20 and a summer internship.
Wow.
And so even in the people analytics sphere, some of the pilots that we're doing, we're getting an amazing amount of value from them, but they're not costing an arm and a leg. I will say that we do use some analytics tools and platforms that do cost a lot, but we're always going through the process of making sure that whatever we're using is actually worth it, and that is the problem that is trying to solve central to our company? Is it a number one priority for our chief people officer, for our CEO, for our board, for our shareholders, our investors? And from that standpoint, we think about, how many problems will this be able to solve, and how important are those problems to solve? It's always important to have adoption over sophistication. You can hammer certain things into the ground with, fancy algorithms and vendors who promise the sun and the moon, but I would much rather something more reasonable, where someone's willing to partner with you to solve a problem, and have individuals within my team who are actually going to use that tool to get things done. So yeah, I don't think you need and you have to have an enormous budget. If you have the resources, fantastic. But I would still say, make sure you're getting, the best value that you can when you're making that investment. At the end of the day, HR might be a cost center, but it's a cost center that can achieve some pretty substantial savings and some pretty substantial increase in productivity that is not necessarily related to just letting people go. There's a lot
Right.
of there's a lot of good that our organization can do. So make sure you're thinking about it from that standpoint.
Well, Tanmay, thank you for sharing. Thanks for doing what you do. I mean, I'm just really thankful you took the time to share your journey, your stories, and look forward to hearing from you again. How can listeners, viewers follow up with you and see what you're doing?
Yeah, and I genuinely appreciate you having me on here. It's been amazing. It's been great to to speak with you, and not just now, but in the lead up to this as well. And if anyone wants to reach out to me, I'm on LinkedIn, Tanmay Manohar. I anticipate there will not be too many other Tanmay Manohars around. Certainly not working at ViacomCBS, so I shouldn't be too hard to find.
Well, again, Tanmay, you be well, stay safe there in New York, and hope to see you in person before too long.
Take care. Look forward to it.
Right.
Bye.
Thanks for joining the People Data for Good podcast with Al Adamsen. To find other podcasts, videos, upcoming events, and to join the People Data for Good movement, please visit us at PAFOW.net.